Hello and good evening to all our eminent speakers and participants in this webinar. My name is Peter. I am the Group CEO of TMI. As we all know, HR has changed, and how. In the last 18 months, we have changed the way we work, not by choice though. The change happened and we adapted as we had to sustain the businesses. Today, the minor adjustment has become the norm, as some are calling it the new normal. Recruitment, training, performance measurement, and every other aspect of people management is being redefined. Let's turn to the future. Big picture is now made up on small units. The micro is driving the macro. We are moving towards mass customization with focus on employee of one. We have with us leaders and thinkers who are managing the change and planning for the future role of HR in the context of micro HR. I now take pleasure to hand over to Mr. T. Muralidharan, our Group Chairman, to lead the discussions with our eminent guests. Over to you, TMD.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. There are a lot of friends here today in this room, whom I consider very personal friends. First of all, a very special welcome to Santrupt ji, Rajesh, and KK. All three of them are stalwarts in their own domain, and we are very keen to listen to you today. Like many of them, I'm also very keen to listen. We don't want to appear presumptuous as if we know what the future of HR should be. What we're going to share today is some of our thoughts, and we are open for discussions with you and listen to your thought process. Before I start off the proceeding for today, I want to set up some broad announcements. The first one is, of course, the sequence. I think the sequence is going to be Ravi will be presenting briefly for 10 minutes about TMI 2.0 after I finish my context setting. And that will be followed by Santrupt ji, Rajesh, and Krishna Kumar. Each speaker, I will introduce them at first in the beginning. And especially, I want to talk a little bit about the relationship with TMI. And each of them will speak for about 15 minutes. And then we will have some questions in the end. Dr. Santrupt is going to leave at 6 o'clock. So I'm going to try and see if there's some questions for Dr. Santrupt ji. We can take it up after his talk is over so that he will have the freedom to leave. I've requested Rajesh and KK to stay back because the questions are very critical for many of the audience today. Post your questions on the, I request all the audience to post their questions in the chat box. Mention your name, name of the person to whom you want to ask the question, and we will take it up in the end. We have two components of today's show. The first component is about launching TMI 2.0, with our chief guest, Dr. Santrupt Misra, has agreed to do so. We'll have a very, very, very short 5-second ceremony on this. Then there will be a talk by our eminent speakers, including Ravi will talk position TMI 2.0. First, I want to talk a little bit about TMI 1.0. Whenever we talk about 2.0, we need to talk about what is TMI 1.0. The story started sometime in 1991. And me and my partner, Mr. Turab Lakadawala, who's from ex-Rajasthan Lever, we are batchmates in IMA, and we started an agriculture business in Hyderabad between 1988 to 91, and we failed. And we decided to quit the business and go back to the corporate world. And we're having a cup of tea, and then Lakadawala reminded me of my commitment to his father that I will not quit for 1,000 days. There was a shortfall of about 30 to 40 days, and I said, we'll stay back, we'll not quit and keep our commitment. In that 40 days, a friend of my wife, who's currently an IAS officer, came one day and he told me, why don't you raise an invoice for 50,000 rupees? I said, what is this 50,000 rupees? What is it for? He said, it's called executive search. All you need to do is to make phone calls, connect people, and you make money. I was surprised because I didn't know what executive search was. And that was the first invoicing we did when TMI 1.0 started. Our first business was search in 1991. We've traveled a long distance from there, right? Basically today, 30 years later, I'm going to just show you quickly where are we today on TMI 1.0. Archana, can you just put the slide, please?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you put it on display mode? So just quickly, very quick background. We are 3 group companies. We operate in 16 countries now. Our operations consist of 470 plus cities in India. And one of our proud customers, we are proud to participate in Birla Sun Life. 470 locations we hire for them. We train for them in many other companies and 400 plus locations. We have 780 partners, recruitment and training partners. And we work with more than government and CSR customers, more than 51 of them. And we have about 6,500 plus e-learning hours we have clocked on the both in 13 Indian and 7 international languages. The most interesting part of all of this, which I'm very proud of, is our work in the last one, what you see on the bottom, 1.3 million e-learners. Ravi has been working with the Government of India to educate and train Anganwadi workers. About 1.3 million Anganwadi workers are now trained by TMI Group company. And I'm very proud to say that more than 80% of them got certified, and they're doing yeoman service and improving the quality of health services at the village level. So this is where we are. So if you have to summarize where we are today, we are in the top 5 in terms of third-party FLEM or frontline executives and managers recruiting and induction. We are in the top 5 in India. Nationally, we are also top 5 in learning content and learning technology with global footprints. I showed you some of the 6 countries where we are operating. We're also top 5 in India in the demand-driven skilling system. And I'm actually very proud of that, because in NSDC ecosystem, we are one of the few partners who right from the beginning believed the government funding is not an option. We went for employer-paid demand-driven skilling system. We have trained more than about 300,000 people and got them jobs across the country. So this is a very brief story of TMI 1.0. Now I'm going to talk about evolution. I think I'm a firm believer that we need to evolve. Everybody has to evolve. The species has to evolve. I personally moved from being an engineer, then went to an MBA, and now I've just completed my law degree, and I hope to practice in the Supreme Court 5 to 7 years from now. Similarly, TMI Group has evolved significantly from a single product company to multi-services group. TMI Group is completely transforming itself now to 2.0. Ravi, our group CEO, will talk about and share some of the details shortly. So TMI from a multi-services company is now transforming into a people performance consulting, measurement, modeling, predictive analytics group. Second, we are becoming a tech company, which HR, automation, recruiting tech and learning tech under one roof. They have become a very, very experienced now in analytics and tech-based micro-solutioning group. The solutions will be focused on how we make employee of one. Why are we doing this? Why is TMI evolving? I think my fundamental belief, and that's the purpose of this seminar, I believe HR as a function also must evolve in the context of major events happening on work automation, remote working, and most importantly, multiple employment relationship. We are no longer going to talk about full-time employees. We're going to talk about gig workers. We're going to talk about part-timers, people working for flexi-timers. Going 10 years, 15 years from now, a large number of our employees will be a combination of these. So the focus of HR will have to shift from aligning HR to business to aligning people to performance, from performance analytics to predictive performance. I think this is a very important transition HR has to make from experience-based hypothesis to data-based hypothesis. You will see later on, Ravi will present some of the ideas. We were surprised that some of the data, which we analyzed data on people behavior, there were a lot of surprises in the way the data was telling us a different story than what I thought from my experience. And fourth, from analyzing what we see to discovering what we don't see. Now, these are some of the transitions which I think HR has to make. We want to align to this new world of HR, and that's why TMI 2.0 is also evolving. So I seek your blessings and good wishes on this new journey of TMI. Now I'm going to introduce very briefly Dr. Santrupt Misra. Everybody knows him. I'll be surprised if many of us in this audience who have not heard of him or seen him in Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. He's a double postgraduate one in political science from Utkal University and personal management from TISS. He's also a double PhD in public administration and industrial relationship, both in India and UK. He's also a lecturer and reader from TISS Mumbai. He made an extraordinary transition from academics to HR to business leader. 25 years plus in Aditya Birla Group after a short stint in HLL. Elected as the top 25 role models in HR industry in 2019. You are the MD of your own performance and development. That's his famous quote. And I believe he's a perfect example of walking the talk. He has always scripted his position and development in the organization. Santruptji, I am extremely proud of my first meeting. I don't know whether you remember in 2000 when you were the HRD network president, and I was invited as a member. Your clarity of thought, your articulation, your ability to take people along, and your ability to remember people and their names has been remarkable. I became a fan of you instantly on that day when I met you for the first time. Our relationship with the Aditya Birla Group and Birla Sun Life has evolved from 2008 when we started, and today we are very, very strong relationship with Birla Sun Life. Inaugurate or launch 2.0.
Yes, sir.
You can go and click on that, click to launch.
Yeah. This is the sir.
All right. Wow.
Thank you so much, Santruptji. I think I'll remember this day for a very long time. I request Ravi now, our group CEO, to quickly present in not more than 10 minutes. What is this TMI 2.2 all about? Over to you, Ravi.
Hey, thank you, Murli. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, sir, we can.
Yeah, Ravi, very briefly for the audience, Ravi is a BTech from Benares and MBA from IIM Calcutta. But his very claim to fame is a science fiction fan and is also, in my opinion, one of the best learning science and learning technology expert in the country. He has been with TMI Group for more than, I think, 25 years, Ravi?
Yeah, 25 plus.
25 plus years. So you have 10 minutes, Ravi. And
Okay.
I warn you 2 minutes in advance. So try and stick to the time.
Sure. Thank you. So we've reinvented ourselves many times over the last 30 years. Murli was talking about the TMI 1.0. Well, it's been 1.0, it's been 1.1, 1.2, and so on. And we have invented ourselves many times over the last 30 years to stay relevant because of you, the customers who've been pushing us, which includes the Birla Group, which includes Access. I think when Rajesh invited us in 2012, and then we've been proud partners of theirs. We are partners with Coca-Cola also, KK. And so we have reinvented ourselves many times over. Having said that, I think this is the biggest reinvention that we are doing, where increasingly we are saying performance is the only language that clients speak, and interestingly, even individuals are speaking. And that's where, based on some of our discoveries, we are thinking that TMI 2.0 has to be anchored around employee of one, whether we are in recruiting, training, learning, the entire life cycle of an employee with an organization, in to out. We have to start visualizing them as an employee of one. So what some of our discoveries is what I would like to talk about. I will skip that piece. So we got a lot of counterintuitive discoveries, which we believe, and in our opinion at least, that this is going to push for significant changes in how human capital is managed. It could be in talent acquisition or development or management or even attrition management or any of these places. So I want to share 4 or 5 key ones that we have looked at. Like I said, Number one that we are realizing now from our customers across the spectrum, whether it is IT companies, whether it is BFSI sector, whether it is FMCG, whether it's even overseas. Increasingly, we started working with Japanese companies to send people there. Everywhere, it's a performance matters and nothing else. So everybody, interestingly, is willing to consider different rewards and recognitions, different benefits model, different job roles, like Murli said, gig workers or job sharing. All sorts of combinations are coming out there, thanks to COVID impact and thanks to work from home and many more talent becoming available. On the other side, we did some surveys. On the employee side, remuneration still matters the most, including whether they can make the incentives and the performance praise, and brand and job security. Of course, thanks to COVID, that's come up a little bit, job security, but otherwise, brand and job security comes later. The interesting counterintuitive piece that we are seeing is the variations in performance will be huge. I'm on the second point, which I hope you can see. And the variations are really humongous. Anywhere from 9 times to 16 times is the variation between a poor performer and a good performer. So how can any organization actually sustain this? This is actual data of feet of street in a BFSI sector customer of ours. While normally one does 4 quadrants, we looked at our own way of looking at it in 6 quadrants, though that's not the right word. The middle band is a 50 to 100%, and the lower band is this. So if you really see, only 16% of them stayed on to actually deliver value to the account. That means they were 100% and beyond. And let's say we given them the honeymoon period of the first 3 months. Beyond that, they are at 100%. And an incredible 45% dropped out of the way very early on. So there is going to be huge variations in performance of the incoming talent, and this needs to be managed. Interestingly, when we moved and looked at it even deeper, even post-training, the right-hand side is post-training, what has been the performance of the same 585 people over a period of 6 months. And you'll see that many of them are in that band, or the average performance is between 80% to 120%. That's the average performance. But underlining that is all these 580 guys have different charts below them. We looked at super performers, these 52. Even these 52 have incredible variation in their patterns. And all these guys are above 140% of target month after month after month. And that's the sort of variation that managers will have to manage. HR and learning teams will have to manage to see, can I reduce this variation? Why does if you look at this bus performer, he's gone up to almost 8 times the target for that month, 9 times almost, right? And then he drops down to something like 5 times. Then he drops down further. Then he climbs up again. Even somebody out here, there is so much of variation. So this jaggedness in performance is something if we can manage, then performance outcome of the organizations is going to be significantly higher. And this increasingly points towards looking at people as an individual. When we looked at attrition, this is for a different set of audience. When we looked at attrition, right, I'm on point number 4, if you can see my screen, we're seeing that role induction training, when you do that really well and people get role clarity, it speeds up attrition, which is in our mind good attrition. Otherwise, this guy stays on and then doesn't deliver value to the organization and eats up 3 months or 4 months or 6 months of salary. So if you can do good role induction, and then the next stage is the performance pressure. So if you look at it, out of that entire attrition in a period of 6 months that we tracked, almost 96% is early attrition and 70% is there. So is there a good attrition? Can we define good attrition? Means if productivity does not go up within 3 months or within 6 months, depending on the complexity of the product. Should we let go of people? Will HR be also responsible for, tactically letting go of people? And I think this was the most incredible discovery that we had when we worked with a bank. So the discussion was, who's a good performer? who's a good supervisor. And we looked at 10 different aspects of that, what could be in the equation for defining a supervisor's sales performance. And it was interesting that 44% of the standard deviation came down to the dispersion in the performance of the sales of his subordinates, right? So if instead of having 2 or 3 people operating at 3 times the productivity norm and half a dozen people operating at 30 or 40% productivity, instead, if they can be between 60 or 70% to 120%, then you can predict the supervisor's sales very significantly. And also the scored attrition of the people who leave this person and go. So interesting modeling can be done out there in terms of who's a good performer, and data allows us to do this. So the future we see for TMI, and we are hoping that increasingly organizations are discovering this too, that we will have to look at that micro HR. We'll have to, and I'll tell what we mean by micro HR, because if you really want macro performance, you're going to need micro HR, and we'll have to think of every employee as an employee of one, especially the large volume people who are in frontline sales and the frontline sales managers, whom we have done an extensive amount of work recently. So what do we say? What do we mean by this? We think hiring will become micro. Increasingly, we are saying the same CV, when I show it in different geographies, with the same background, with the same work experience, even sometimes same demographic parameters, they're not getting accepted. Interestingly, even from one branch in Hyderabad to another branch in Hyderabad, the same CV does not get accepted. We're seeing this because the customer types are different. So the branch heads who wants to hire them is looking for a different profile. So my standard straw profile is going to keep on getting hyper local and will keep on getting evolved over time, perhaps over season. And sometimes you might need a farmer, sometimes you might need a hunter. So we believe hiring will become micro.
Ravi, 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm down to four slides only.
2 minutes. Yeah.
We think training will also be micro, because based on the experience, demographic, psychographic, what are the past performance, what are the present competence, we'll have to give something that is interesting for this person. Similarly, with learning and coaching and counseling, how can we have one coaching model that fits every employee of ours or every even frontline sales guy of ours? Why would they learn what they already know or something that they're good at? So we need to create, that again, treat them as employee of one and devise models for that. Even the progression path, or how do we motivate them? How do we sustain them? How do we ensure that they don't quit and go? All of this, we'll have to think of them as individuals. How are we able to do it? We have recently invested over the last 2 years, a significant amount of effort in HR analytics, both sides, Tableau-driven visualization, and a lot of statistical analysis, which gives us descriptive, predictive, and interestingly, prescriptive. Can we predict what's going to be the performance, and more importantly, say who's the person who should hire, who's the person who can be retained? Data will tell us that if you can partner with customers and model this. So we want to actively partner with our clients to do this. Similarly, on the other side, we have invested over the last 14, 15 months in building HR bots, first for ourselves and now for our clients. We have a US customer now. So bots, because we believe increasingly HR can't be managed by just the recruiter or the payroll person or HR operations staff. You will need bots. The amount of transactions, the amount of data we will need to process is not going to be easy. So we've done some significant investment in HR bots building. And we think a combination of analytics and HR bots, along with this people consulting, where we hope to partner with external consultants. A lot of HR experts are out there. They are our friends. So we want to combine with them, use our analytics, use the bots, and build models using that performance analytics, and remodel our entire delivery of hiring, learning, training, assessments, staffing, the entire schema we are changing. Additionally, I'll just take a minute, Murli. We are working on a very interesting product on peer-to-peer learning. We believe this Gen Z is not listening to old people. That's what we are hearing increasingly from many of our customers. They want to listen to each other. So we are creating a product initially for frontline executives and managers. It's role-centric. It's going to be peer-assisted. So we are generating video. The model is to generate video content from performers. So if, for example, Rajesh in Axis Bank, someone earns 1 lakh incentive, if you can ask him what are those 3 things that he is doing, and take that, combine with somebody else from some other location who's talking about maybe pitching, somebody else about need identification. So we have rich video from peers, which will be believable, which will be easy for them to use. And we're building a simple model called ACT, Assess, Correct, and Try. So we'll send them through assessments, and then they learn good practices from each other, not from gurus whom they think gurus are too good, they can do it, we can't do it. But from peers, they will be willing to learn and improve themselves, and they will try and test it. So that is the avatar we see for ourselves: consulting, people performance consulting using analytics, bots. We will deliver it, and then increasingly peer-to-peer learning, peer-to-peer activities. Thank you.
And now I think I'm going to invite Dr. Santrupt Misra, whom we are all waiting for. Santrupt ji, over to you.
Thank you, Murli. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, friends at TMI. I first of all congratulate you on making those 30 times of changes, as Ravi described so beautifully, through your journey of over 2 decades. And congratulate you and wish you all the best for TMI 2.0. In today's fragile world, not many organizations survive to live through their 1.0, and that you are fortunate and successful and impactful that you reinventing yourself to 2.0 is a fantastic thing that you are achieving. My best wishes. We live in a technological era, and if we cannot harness technology, it is going to be unfortunate. But it's interesting that we live in times of contradiction. On one side, we talk about human performance. On the other side, we talk about driverless cars. There is no human performance involved there. So I think there is contradiction of all kinds that we live through, and therefore finding a final reliable answers to anything is difficult. And that is where human performance matters, because at the end of the day, at the end of all technology where ends, the human beings take over, because that's where the human ingenuity and creativity comes. Yesterday morning or yesterday evening, those of us who, or day before evening, those of us who watched the IPL match between Chennai Super Kings and Delhi Capitals would realize that human performance matters at the end of the day. Whether you call end of life cycle Dhoni, still works as a finisher. So I think the role of human performance in taking the world forward is unceasing. We noticed that during the COVID vaccine discovery process, that human endeavor took to that, and if people put their mind to it, spectacular performance can be achieved even in emerging countries like India. To tackle a new virus is all well proven. As I woke up yesterday morning, I saw in my inbox a Bank of America report, which reported that Bitcoins are the 9th largest asset class in the world, much lower than gold, behind Facebook, but ahead of Tesla. Tesla is supposed to be a technology-rich company. Bitcoins is something that we have never held, nor will perhaps hold it. Many of us have never seen it, but it's the 9th largest asset class in the world. Now, it is so because it is performing, whatever is the definition of performance. And I always believe that for emerging economies like India, productivity is the core challenge. The faster we can increase productivity, the faster will be per capita income growth, the faster would be our prosperity, the faster would be our ability to raise millions of people above the poverty line, give them a decent life, give them decent education, healthcare, and all of that. Therefore, the topic or the subject that you have picked up to create a new business model around TMI 2.0 is the heart of what emerging economies are about, what today's world is all about, is how to enhance human performance and productivity, technology-assisted performance and productivity. I think the debate whether technology is going to substitute human beings is dead. I believe that the machine and man, technology or human ingenuity partnership is what is going to bring about productivity in human society and better performance. Coming down to the employee of one, I think as Ravi rightly said, as Murli introduced it, when everything is changing around us, we in human resources function must change, and we are changing. But there are also aspects in which we are not changing. For example, for long, performance appraisal has been a tool or a best practice or a technique or armor of human profession. We have spent far too much of time on performance appraisal than discussing with people what performance is all about. Even today, I think largest corporates do not spend time on defining what performance is. Is it longitudinal performance? Is it market share? Is it return on capital employed? Is it earning per share? What exactly is performance? What exactly is performance for the front line? What exactly is performance for the board of directors? A lot of the time we are having debates about board of directors appraisal. Again, if you come to this, you find that most of the board of directors are busy following the Companies Act and the contemporary SEBI regulation in doing appraisal of the board of directors, but never sitting down to discuss what would be the indicators of performance of a board of directors. What would be the indicator of performance of an independent director? What is the indicator of performance of a chairman of the REM committee or the nomination remuneration committee, as we call it? So ladies and gentlemen, the question is that we can manage performance if we get clarity and learn to discuss about performance. What is performance? What are the contours of performance? What are the different options of performance? The point that Ravi was mentioning, that you could hire the same CV in one branch and not hire in another branch, goes to the heart of this problem. Is to say, what is performance in one branch may be different than what is performance in another branch. And therefore, the skill set, the mindset, the profile, the experience that you need in one branch could be different from another. I have looked at our retail business. You know, we have got 14 different businesses, and garment retailing is one of them. Outstanding brands, Louis Philippe, Van Heusen, Alan Solly. I'm conscious I'm on company time, so I'm promoting few brands of mine. That's called performance to my mind. If in your company time, even with an external audience, you can promote your brands, that is your performance. But jokes apart, when I look at my retail stores, I find that the footfall over the weekend alone is 50% more than the combined footfall in the previous 5 days. Now, when I look at a kind of profile of customer visit of that kind, obviously I ask myself, what's the staffing pattern I would follow? And the answer to that is, obviously, I cannot have a permanent workforce that is meant for peak footfall by the customers. I need to have a flexible workforce that comes in the weekend and meets the requirements. Now, the question is, it is good to talk about gig workforce. The question is, how do you make sure that your gig workforce is effective workforce, performing workforce over that weekend? Then the question comes is, if you manage to find the right people to recruit, you need to retain those who are faster on the learning curve, because if they come back again on the next weekend and the following weekend, those who are faster on the learning curve, learning your product, learning your processes, your billing, your return policy, your customer etiquette, and all of that, if those gig workforce come back week after week and show a differential learning curve, they are my performing workforce, because they apply that knowledge, that skill that I have taught them at the initial stage, that is retained, and they come back. So who do I retain? Are people who have learned and are learned to apply it. And how do I identify it? And that's where comes the technology. How do I use technology to assess who's that individual who's learning? If I'm taking a gig workforce of, let's say, 30 in a store, I need to choose the 3 or 5 whose learning curve is very sharp. They're picking up faster, that I need to make sure that I bring them back weekend after weekend to perform. And I'm giving that example to say that in every business model, in every industry, there is an opportunity to find out the needs of performance. Ravi talked about brilliantly about the research where the dispersion of performance they notice. It is not a phenomenon that is new. We all know that. Our scholastic achievements have been different. In the same family, 2 children, 4 children, all of them have been different. Unless you belong to Chandra's family in Tata, as my good friend, all his brothers have done well. God bless them. I hope many families are people like that. But unfortunately, George Orwell determined that some people are equal and some are more equal than others. And that's how the dispersion comes in. Now, we have realized long since in our families and our life that there is an unequal distribution. Performances are variant, they are patchy. Many times we have not debated and questioned, why there is variation in performance, even in the same context. The context being non-variant, why should there be variance in performance? If your recruitment selection process has worked well and you are hiring very standardized people, why does it move? To give an example, what is performance and why the employee of one is important? I raised a question with my colleagues yesterday in the context of the retail store. I said, tell me, if your footfall on the weekend is 50% more than the previous 5 days put together, how does the behavior and role of the store manager change in the weekend vis-a-vis the previous 5 days? And surprise, surprise, many organizations have never taught their store manager what is required or what changes in terms of performance for them in a high intensity footfall over the weekend vis-a-vis the stable performance over the previous 5 days. Now, contextual factors like this, if we can capture in different business model, operating conditions, firms, floors, and bring it in an intelligible bite size to the people working on the floor, be the manager or their team members, and create discussion, conversation around what would performance look like, what would high performance look like, what is changing in the context, and how can they leverage their skill and attitude and learning to adapt to be able to deliver. I think there are unique opportunities where technology can be used. But having said all of that, I would again urge that we must think and remember that technology is there to support us. All this analytics will come to nothing unless there is a smart manager who knows how to apply, how to use it to make a difference in that context to that individual or the group of individuals. If we talk more about employee of one, we run also a risk, and we need to be mindful of that and find out ways of addressing that risk. The risk is India is still a country of scarce opportunities. India still experiences hyper competition between individuals to access what is considered to be blessings in life, such as good quality education, good schools, good colleges, good universities. Murli referred to his career in IIM Ahmedabad. Very few people have that privilege. Thousands of people apply, very few get it. So trampling over each other to access the opportunities of life is the natural DNA of India. Employee of one, while has the opportunity to work at a micro level, because of course this is a age of everything micro, micro surgery, micro irrigation, micro nutrient, micro fertilizer, everything micro. And it does not surprise me that micro performance and micro attention draws your attention, and you rightly spotted an opportunity. But the risk is, could attention at a unit level on individual employee and requirements further take us away from our ability to collaborate and collectively solve problems, support each other? And I think every wonderful solution in life, including coronavirus vaccines, always have a side effect. it is natural that as you develop your model of micro employee of the one approach, you will discover through your subsequent research that there are unanticipated, unwelcome, unpalatable side effects. And of course, that's a new human challenge, because then you find what's the antidote to that? How do I modify my product, my approach, my philosophy to mitigate that particular risk? We have a new workforce coming through. Perhaps this is the first time people who are born after 2000 are coming into the workforce. Another 20 years down the line, you will have another set of workforce who would have been perhaps just getting into educational system during the pandemic, who would have simply learned through digital system, never seen a school or classroom. The way we are going, I do not know. Maybe they will learn in a hybrid mode where 20% in the classroom, 80% digitally. And maybe a future generation will completely come digitally. And maybe you are preparing the world for that future, where people who have learned individually without going to a classroom digitally all by themselves in front of a computer screen in their home and bedroom, they are the natural individual agents of performance that would come into society. So I compliment all of you for thinking about a radically different idea, having the courage to experiment with it, bring it to public domain, create a platform of this kind to debate that. I apologize to my co-speakers and colleagues, Rajesh, Krishna Kumar, and others, that I have another activity going on to which I have to get back. I won't be there beyond 6 o'clock. I would love to hear your views in any manner. Murli, you can let me know if you're recording or sending a transcript or whatever. But having said all of that, I wish TMI 2.0 perhaps 30 times more success than TMI 1.0 was. And may you continue to serve Indian business, Indian government, Indian CSR sector, underprivileged, marginal, unskilled HR community, and all of them with your passion, with your courage, your conviction, and your commitment. And good luck to all of you. And thank you for having me with you this evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Santrupt ji. I think, as usual, you charmed all of us with a very deep understanding of the psychology and the science behind understanding human behavior. Very often, I think one of the questions also came up in all this risk of going micro, we become more and more transactional, and organizations may become transactional. So where are the people aspirations, their desires, how are they going to be met? These are some of the questions that are coming up. I have only one question before I let you go, which I think many people have asked me. How do we create, for a young HR professional who's there in the room, how do they become future ready in the context of what you said? What are the two or three things they should do to be ready for the future among the HR professionals?
Well, it's a tough question. I think it's not just true of HR professional, but for every profession today. I think we need to keep our minds very open and spongy, where we are able to connect the dots. HR, at the end of the day, operates within a social system, techno-social system. And there is, in open systems, as you all know, there is the interaction between the environment and the internal system. We are not closed systems. And therefore, ability to see how geopolitics impacts an organization, including HR. For example, today, because of geopolitics, pandemic, all your talent development plan that involved your expatriation is dead. So if you do not anticipate things of that kind, I think connecting the dots that can be connected, connecting the dots that do not seem to have a connection with each other, I think keeping mind open to be able to combine religious, philosophy, literature, HR function knowledge, business, statistics, I think all of this. So therefore, keeping a spongy mind is open. The age of a narrow HR professional who only understands compensation, only understands, don't misunderstand me, specialization is needed and is important. But a narrow specialist is not needed. A specialist who is able to soak in the broader societal point of view and body of knowledge and interdisciplinary insight from different parts would be important, and I would urge them to understand that. Number two, invest into understanding your sector or your organization that you operate in. Very often our knowledge of the sector that we operate in is very superficial. I think we need to invest a little more into understanding the sector, its value drivers, the challenges. My good friend Rajesh is here. He will tell you, you cannot operate in HR today in financial services and banking sector without a deep understanding of regulation. Everything that happens in financial services, banking sector is regulated. RBI regulates, Insurance Regulatory Authority regulates, somebody else regulates. There are regulations and regulations and more regulations. Now, if you say you are an HR guy and you do not relate and understand regulations, that's not going to work. So therefore, I think understanding the sector and its nuances is the second part. And the third part, which is your domain, Murli, in TMI, and the new offering that you are creating, is learning to use data to argue a conviction or a point of view or a case, and learning to use analytics and data to design a program. You know, for a long, long time, HR was an act of faith. Our interventions were an acts of faith. But I think people are no longer willing to buy that unless you are able to give a justification through data. You are able to show impact with data. But again, don't misunderstand me. The role of conviction and courage still is there in leadership. You cannot simply be data driven. Sometimes you have to go counterintuitively against data to take a decision. But that does not preclude your ability to use data, absorption and understanding of data. But I think these broad three things, if new generation HR young people can start working on, I think they'll make finest HR leaders of the future.